Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, the 2019 M+R Benchmarks Study, Online Fundraising, Advocacy, Marketing, and More. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. So all callers will be muted. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat box that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. If you lose your internet connection, you can reconnect using the link emailed to you. And if you have to drop off early, the webinar will be hosted on our website at TechSoup.org/community/events-webinars. We'll also be sending an email with the presentation, the recording, and any relevant links. If you're on social media, feel free to tweet at us at TechSoup using hashtag TSWebinars. But like I said earlier, we'll be focused on the chat box that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. So just a little bit about TechSoup before we get started. We are located in 236 countries and territories, and we serve over 1 million nonprofits around the world, offering donated or discounted technologies. We partner with several technology companies like Adobe, Intuit, Microsoft, Symantec, and several more that you see here. If you're interested in finding out more, if your organization is available, I'll be sending out a link where you can see if your organization is eligible to receive these donated or discounted technologies. In addition to that, we also offer tech consulting, product donations and discounts, training, apps for change, and several other resources. So please visit our website at TechSoup.org for more information. Also, just so you guys know, we have a special that's happening today and tomorrow with GrantStation. It's a $99 GrantStation special, and it's a $600 discount. So if you guys are interested in grant-seeking resources, this is available today and tomorrow. All right, so before we get started, I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me okay. So if you don't mind just typing in the chat box where you're calling in from, and I'll read a few of them out just to make sure you guys can hear me okay. All right, so we have Utah, Denver, Tampa, Iowa, Georgia, Cambridge. Okay, cool. So it seems like you guys can hear me okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make introductions. So my name is Seema Tucker, and I'm the Senior Manager of Content here at TechSoup. We also have Teresa, who's here from M+R, that is helping us with chat on the back end. So if you guys have questions about the report, she'll be available to answer them as we go along. And then we have our main presenter today, Will Valverde, who is the Creative Director at M+R. He's also the lead writer of the annual Benchmarks Study. He has spent more than a decade helping major nonprofits develop memorable online advocacy and fundraising campaigns with a special focus on creative engagement. Will leads online strategy for groups like Planned Parenthood, Federation of America, and he has crafted innovative content and interactive campaigns for groups including Feeding America, the Smithsonian Institution, and Union of Concerned Scientists. So I will now pass it off to Will.
Hi, thanks, Seema. It's super embarrassing to have your professional bio read out loud. I don't know about that. It seems so braggy. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Will Valverde. As Seema mentioned, I'm the Creative Director at M+R and the lead writer of Benchmarks. I am joined by Teresa Bugeaud. She is the Director of Data Analytics at M+R. She leads the massive undertaking that is collecting and analyzing and interpreting all the data that we collect for Benchmarks each year. So we have a lot to get through today. It's going to be a lot of numbers and charts thrown at you in pretty short order. So if you do have any questions, in particular clarifying questions about sort of how we're defining terms and that sort of thing, do use that chat box. Teresa is monitoring that and we'll be able to answer any questions that you have, and that way we can just keep things moving along briskly. Before we get started, I do want to point out that everything that I talk about today and lots more is all available for download and to explore online at mrbenchmarks.com or mrbenchmarks.com if you prefer. So all the charts and a lot more that we're not able to make room for here are available there. So please spend some time there. It is a lot of fun. So a little bit about M+R and who we are before we get started. We work with all kinds of nonprofits to do good in the world, and that includes everything that you might do online to support a nonprofit, from digital fundraising and advocacy to ads and organizing, as well as media relations. So that's who we are. We are committed to doing that work and committed to helping nonprofits make the world a better place. Part of the way that we do that every year is through our annual benchmark study, which is our effort to sort of get the lay of the land and share it freely and broadly with as many people as we can. We really believe that good data leads to better decisions and better strategy, and that's how we're going to be more effective as nonprofits. If that sounds like the sort of thing that you and people that you love like to do, we are hiring. We have lots of open positions. I encourage you to visit us at mrss.com/careers, see what is available, and come join us because we do lots of really fun, interesting things, as you will see very shortly. So our 2019 benchmark study is our effort to get as much data as we can every year from as many nonprofits as we can, and put it all together to see what is changing, in particular online. The online landscape moves so quickly, and what we are doing now as fundraising professionals or organizers or marketers is very different than what we were doing even just a couple of years ago. And keeping track of those changes, keeping track of those trends is a lot of work. It is something that we cannot do alone, which is why we rely on our nonprofit partners. This year's benchmark study includes data from 135 different nonprofits of all kinds of different sectors. So when you look at this, you'll see we've broken out here by sector. When we look at our charts, you will often see an overall average for a given metric, say open rates, and then we usually try to break that out by sector as well. So you'll see a separate open rate average for cultural institutions, environmental, health, etc. If your sector is not represented on a chart, so if you're in the rights sector and you notice that on a particular chart rights doesn't show up, that's because we didn't have enough information from that sector for that particular metric, so we've dropped them off in order to give a good, reliable number. So that's why you might see your sector kind of come in and out on some of these charts. We also do break out by size. Actually, I'll get to that in a couple of slides. These are all of our wonderful participants, these 135 nonprofits. If you are not sure where you fall in terms of the sector, you can look up the full list at mrbenchmarks.com, and that'll give you a sense of sort of where your peers are. You can see the groups that you consider to be like you, and that'll give you the best sense of sort of where your peers are. If you are not on this beautiful array of wonderful logos and you would like to be, join us next year. The more nonprofits we get, the more participants we have every year, the better and more reliable our data is. And so we really do appreciate the generosity and the time that these participants put in to help make Benchmarks what it is. If you are one of these people, thank you so much. We love you. Every year, like I said, our landscape changes, and so we try to keep up with that change by adding more and more content to the benchmarks study, which makes it harder and harder to get through everything in a 1 hour long webinar, but that is my problem here. Some of the things we looked at for the first time this year include Facebook fundraisers, peer-to-peer text messaging, membership data as distinct from other kinds of revenue, as well as ticket sales data. And then we also broke out retention by giving level, which this all sounds like kind of boring right now, but wait until you see these charts. It's going to be very exciting. This year, we also changed the way that we are looking at nonprofits by size. So we've always broken out by small, medium, and large in every one of our studies. We used to calculate that based on email list size as sort of the best sort of approximation of how big your presence is online. That has been, especially as other parts of online programs become increasingly important, felt sort of unsatisfactory to us. So this year, for the first time, we're actually basing the size of a nonprofit in our charts based on their annual online revenue, so online revenue only. So whenever you see a chart refer to a small organization or the average for small groups, those are groups that receive less than $500,000 online in a year. Medium is from $500,000 to $3 million, and any group that receives more than $3 million online in a year counts as a large group for our purposes. Okay, we're going to talk about lots of different stuff. Let's get ready. Okay, so the big headline number for this year is that online revenue for nonprofits grew by only 1% this year. which is very different from what we've seen in the past. When I say this year, all the data that we have here is based on 2018 numbers. So in 2018, online revenue was 1% higher than in 2017 for the average group. And when I say average, for the purposes of our study, that means the median group in our organization, which means that half of the study participants had a higher number for the given metric, half of them had a lower measure for that given metric. This is our 13th benchmark study. In all of the other ones, we reported year-over-year growth in the double digits, typically somewhere in the teens. A growth of 1%, relatively flat change year over year, is definitely a new experience for a lot of us. And taken from the perspective of sort of from one benchmark study to the next, this feels really dramatic and really troubling, I think, for a lot of groups. For those of us who are day-to-day doing fundraising online, this might not be quite so surprising. I think a lot of nonprofits had sort of a disappointing December, not seeing the kind of growth they're used to seeing, and the kind of response we're used to seeing. It does feel like this is sort of reflects our lived experience, and we want to dive a little bit deeper into sort of why this number is the way that it is and what we think it can tell us. So first, let's take a step back and put this in context. From 2016 to 2017, we measured 23% growth, and then that dropped to 1% growth year over year in the next year. I see a question from Chris asking if the webinar will be recorded. Yes, it will be recorded and made available afterward. So that's a big drop. And for any of these metrics where we are taking a look back before 2018, all of that historical data is from this current year's participants. So we are not going back to the study that we published last year and comparing that number to the number here. We actually asked our participants this year to provide data going back a few years so that we could make these sort of apples-to-apples comparisons. So that drop from 23% growth to 1% growth is real. And we can see that this is really stands out for certain sectors. So if you look at the rights sector in particular, they experienced 88% growth from 2016 to 2017, almost doubling revenue from one year to the next, and then a decline in revenue of 14% in the following year. That's from that really elevated baseline, and it is that swing that explains a lot of what is going on here and why this 1% increase in revenue is maybe a little more complicated than it appears on the surface. This is a very complicated set of charts, but we're going to walk through it step by step. So what we're looking at here is online revenue since 2014 based on the 2014 baseline. So if you look at the black bar, I'm just going to look at the all category here in the top left there. If we look over here, we see that there was 13% growth over the 2014 baseline in 2015. So that's that kind of double-digit growth I was mentioning before. Now, the next year, that was up to 34%. And so this 34% is based, again, on the 2014 baseline. So we are now in 2016, raising 34% more than we had in 2014. That's a pretty steady growth line. That's not too much of a jump dramatically from what we saw in the year before. And then in 2017, we see this big jump, and it jumps up to almost 70%. That is a really big jump in growth. That is what we saw in that last chart. And what we are seeing here is that the anomalous year may actually have been 2017. I think for a lot of groups, this is a reflection of the 2016 election. In the aftermath of that, we saw people be really engaged. We saw a lot of supporters really digging deep and really giving with a sense of urgency to causes that they cared about. And so that big jump from 2016 to 2017 then put us on this trajectory that was really unusual sort of historically. And based on that really elevated baseline, 2018 was not able to sort of keep up that pace of growth or really much growth at all. We basically were able to sort of just match what had already happened. And so one of the ways that you might interpret these numbers, and we might look at it, is to say that it's not so much that 2018 had no growth, it's that the growth of 2018 actually happened the year before. It happened in 2017, and it just sort of like took the calendar some time to catch up to the growth we had already seen. If that's the case, then we would expect to see in our next year's report that we would go back to that sort of 13%-ish sort of double-digit growth year over year, and the sort of overall trend line would continue. We don't know yet. Very excited to find out what happens. But it may be that actually 2018 was fairly normal and that 2017 was the year that was really anomalous. And if you look at the sector breakouts here, you can see that the experience was really dramatically different for a lot of groups in these years and a lot of volatility. Email revenue in particular declined by 8% in 2018 from 2017. And that is the first time we've reported a decline. The sort of story that I've been telling for a while in benchmarks has really been that individual email metrics tend to go down year over year. So when we look at our open rates, our click-through rates, that sort of thing, those metrics have declined sort of steadily over time. But that decline is more than made up for by increase in list size and increase in volume, how many messages we're sending out. That tipping point shifted in this last year, where we did still see those sort of long-term trends continue. The individual metrics went down, volume and list size went up, but the increase in list size, the increase in email volume was not enough to keep up, and so we saw an 8% decline in email revenue from 2017. Again, you can look at the rights group, rights sector in particular here. These tend to be groups that engage in a lot of advocacy work that are oftentimes more political in nature than some of the other sectors. And we're seeing a lot of volatility from them in the couple of years since the 2016 election. More emails were sent. I see a question from Y Israel. We'll get to the email metrics in detail in a moment here, but yes, nonprofits sent slightly more emails in 2018 than in 2017. Volume did continue to increase. Now, that doesn't mean that email doesn't work. It means that email is hard. Email still accounts for 13% of all online revenue. And email appeals directly accounted for that much. And so it's still a really important, really substantial piece of the program for a lot of nonprofits, and for some nonprofits it's quite a bit higher than that. So this is not a case of like, oh, email is dead and we can ignore it now. It is that email is hard, and it is getting harder over time for sort of lots of reasons, some of which have to do with the way that nonprofits operate, some of which just have to do with the way that our supporters, the general public, is engaging with email, is using email in their day-to-day lives, and those long-term trends affect us as well. Another way that we like to interpret the way that email, how effective our email is at raising money, is to look at the revenue per 1,000 fundraising emails sent. So if you sent a fundraising email to 1,000 subscribers, you received $45 back in revenue from that appeal on average. There's a lot of variation here depending on sector size, but this is why it's hard. This is why we work so hard to make sure that we are getting the right message to the right people at the right time, why email content matters so much, because and why growing your list is really, really important, because even when there's variation here, we are not seeing large variation. There are very many groups that are seeing dramatically higher results than this, and it means that you have to be making sure that you are growing your list constantly and getting people in who are interested in your message, who care about your cause, and who will respond when you make an appeal. Looking closer at sort of this 1% overall growth number, one-time revenue actually decreased by 2% in 2018. So gifts from people saying, I want to give you $35 right now, that revenue decreased by 2%, a slight drop from the previous year. That was balanced by the increase in monthly giving. So monthly giving increased by 17% over the previous year. And this is sort of a really extreme example of a longer-term trend that we have seen. So we have seen monthly giving growing at a faster clip than one-time giving for a while now, for a few years. And so that is a really stark difference as we look at the previous year here. So that 1% growth is really attributable to an increase in monthly giving. We can see that one-time giving dropped for most sectors and dropped by 2% on average from the previous year. The stability and the reliability of sustaining donors, I think, has never been more important than it is right now. This is really a sign that because retention is so much higher, because donors are not having to make sort of an affirmative decision to give again in each subsequent year, we can see that there is sort of a steadiness in the face of volatility when we have sustaining donors. So when you have a big chunk of your revenue that is coming in from monthly donors, regardless of what happens in the political world, regardless of what is happening in the world around us, you can count on that to be a little more stable and continue an upward trajectory without these sort of big swings from year to year. And we can see how increasingly that important that slice of the pie is when we look at monthly giving as a percentage of online revenue. And so here what we see is that in 2017, the black bar, monthly giving accounted for 13% of all online revenue. In 2018, that number increased to 16%. So again, as monthly giving growth outpaces one-time giving growth, it's going to be a bigger part of the pie. And that means that nonprofits will have an easier time budgeting and forecasting looking ahead because that revenue tends to be more stable and it's less reliant on external events. It becomes a little easier to say, we know we can expect to raise X number of dollars from monthly donors over the next 6 months, 12 months, and onward. I'm going to take a little bit of a look at donor retention in particular here. We saw that donor retention did decline a little bit from 2017 to 2018. It was a 3% decline. When we're talking about online donor retention, for the purposes of our study here, this is online to online retention. So a donor who gave online in 2017 and then made an online gift again in 2018. If a donor switches channels, say they give online in 2017 and then they respond to a direct mail offer in 2018, they're not going to be counted as retained here. The individual nonprofit likely will consider them a retained donor, and we encourage people to give across channels. But just it's because the data is so hard to keep clean, we are consistently talking here about online to online retention. We can see a sort of an unsurprising pattern here, which is that new donors who gave for the first time in the first year, have a lower retention than those who have given before. So we have a 25% retention rate for donors who gave for the first time in 2017. 25% of them gave again in 2018. For those who were prior donors, so those who gave at some point before 2017, gave in 2017, 59% of them also gave in 2018. So those who have sort of a track record of making repeated gifts to a nonprofit sort of demonstrate higher retention levels. And between the two of them, we average out to a 37% overall retention. That number did decline, as I mentioned, by 3% overall in the previous year. It's a particularly stark drop for new donors. And again, maybe seeing here a little bit, especially if you look at the rights groups, once again, sort of leading the charge here in maybe not the best way, we may have seen sort of a really strong outpouring of energy, enthusiasm, and generosity in 2017 in response to real-world events, and that faded. Essentially, that bump that we were seeing in 2017 faded in 2018, and it remains to be seen sort of the long-term impact of those donors. When we look at donor retention by donor level, so by the amount of your gift, we see some interesting patterns, and we go into a little more detail here in the actual study itself. But briefly, at the lowest end, those donors who are giving under $25, they tend to have really low retention rates. They're coming back at about 10%. The gray bars here is the most recent year-over-year comparison. As we go up the ladder, we start to see better and better retention. In particular, we see a big jump from that 50 to 99 level to the donors who are giving between 100 and 250. Part of this jump is likely due to the presence of monthly donors because they retain at higher levels. They're not so likely to fall under $100 a year. You'd have to be giving $8 a month to fall underneath there. They're going to really contribute to higher retention. It is not, however, a sort of a one-to-one proportional increase as we go up that ladder. We do not see sort of increasing retention. Retention peaks at the $250 to $500 giving level and then goes down a bit with some volatility year over year. If you look at mrbenchmarks.com, we have more information about retention. I think it's super exciting, and I'm sad that I didn't get to include it here. Where we also look at the share of revenue that's coming in from each of these giving levels and how that's changing over time. I encourage you to pick that up because it's really interesting, and it's a pretty chart. It's one of the prettiest ones. For the first time this year, we also looked at membership and ticket giving. And so membership in this context is membership that has sort of a tangible value associated with it. So we're talking about the kind of membership that might give you access to a zoo or some other sort of institution or museum where you sort of pay your annual membership and you get to go and take your family all year long. as well as membership that has other tangible value. So if you are getting a tote bag and a t-shirt, that kind of membership would be considered here. We are not counting membership that is more symbolic in nature, so the kind of membership where I make my $35 gift and you send me a card in the mail that says I'm a member on it. Because there's not sort of a tangible exchange there, we are not including that here. So just to be clear about our terms, doesn't mean that sending the card in the mail is not actually a good tactic. It can be really great in a lot of ways, but it's just not what we're looking at. Ticket sales are a little more clear-cut. It's buying a ticket to a thing. Although in this case, we are excluding sort of one-off events. So if you have a gala event and you have sort of an annual thing, we're not counting those tickets. We are mostly looking here at tickets to a museum, to a zoo, to a sort of an ongoing cultural institution for the most part. All that said, when we look at membership as a percentage of total revenue, for those groups that have membership programs, more than 3/4 of the revenue is now coming from membership giving, and that's a pretty big increase from the year before. That change in membership revenue, however, that growth rate really reflects what we're seeing in other online giving. So from 2016 to 2017, membership revenue jumped up by 21%. And then in the following year, that growth was still there, but it dropped down to 5%. So just like we saw in other online channels, non-membership giving, a big increase from 2016 to 2017, and then reduced growth the following year, the membership giving really tracks that. Ticket revenue is off doing its own other weird thing off to the side. Ticket revenue is not following those sort of overall giving patterns. As a percentage of total revenue for those groups that have ticket revenue, it bumped up from 27 to 29%. But the overall revenue was a big jump. So it was a 32% growth from 2016 to 2017. So really big, like we were seeing in other channels, but that growth did not slow down in the following year. That did not follow the trend of other sources of online giving. Ticket revenue increased by an additional 52% from 2017 to 2018. And so what we're seeing there is that is sort of, it's not following those patterns. It is likely due to some behavioral changes, both on the part of nonprofits and on the part of visitors or supporters, those buying tickets. Nonprofits are making an effort to make it easier to buy tickets instead of going to the box office. At the same time, all of us in our daily lives are being trained to use our phones to do things like this instead of standing in line, and so we're going to see some of that shift to online. Some of this may be also due just to what is going on at the institutions that are selling ticket revenue. So if you have a great new exhibition and you have a new dinosaur thing going on and your overall ticket sales grow, you would see that reflected here as well. So some of this may be actually independent of the overall sort of technological changes. So taking a closer look at membership programs, what we see, so the top bar here, this black bar, this is our overall retention number that we have just looked at in the last few slides, 37% revenue overall. Those groups with membership programs had lower retention rate, and they had a sharp break between their member retention and their non-member retention. So this orange bar here is for groups that had a membership program, 33% of their members in 2017 became members again in 2018. So they retained 33% of their membership. They're non-member donors. So those members who don't get the tote bag but just make a donation or don't get the membership so they can come to the museum every other week. They just want to make a charitable donation. They retained at far lower rates. So just a 17% retention rate. This is, again, within group. So to the extent that these groups are successfully transferring people, moving people from a non-member donor to a member donor, that will tend to drive down that retention number. But in general, we do see significantly higher retention for those supporters who are members. So for those of you who run sort of both a membership program and a non-member program, probably this looks familiar to you, but in general, we're seeing much higher retention for those members. All right, let's look at even more charts. Is everybody still having fun? It's hard to say who's having fun here because I can only see Teresa, and I know that she enjoys these charts. But we're going to keep on going. As I mentioned before, list size did continue to increase in 2018. That growth rate was a little bit slower than what we had seen in previous years. So last couple of years, we had 8% growth, 9% growth. In 2018, those list growth dropped down to 5% year over year. There are some outliers here. I don't know what is happening with health groups. Some of the numbers are hard to explain. They had a lot of growth in list size on average. So we are seeing successful sort of expansion of our audience when we're talking about email list size. And this is what we're sending to them. This is a breakdown of the messages a subscriber will receive over the course of a year on average. So if we look at the left-hand column there, the overall, 25 messages out of the full stream would be fundraising messages. An additional 10 would be advocacy messages. 11 would be newsletters, so I guess we skipped a month on average. And then for other would include, it could be an event invitation. It could be just a cultivation message, a thank you for being a friend kind of message. That would fall in the other category. So this volume is a little bit higher than what we saw before. We saw a single digits, that was 4% growth in overall email, and a little bit higher than that for fundraising. Not dramatically different. This is pretty much what we've seen in the past. And if you look at some groups, the experience is really different. So there's also really stark differences here depending on your sector. So if we just go down the list, cultural institutions tend to not do a lot of advocacy work. I think that's sort of who they are. If you look at international groups, they have a really high volume of messaging, in particular a really high volume of fundraising messages. So these are groups that are responding to humanitarian crises, refugee crises, an earthquake, a hurricane. They have a large volume. If you're on one of these lists, you're hearing from them a lot. And you're in particular receiving a lot of fundraising appeals. If you look at public media, they send a lot of newsletters, closer to a weekly schedule than a monthly schedule, which again makes sense given sort of what their cause is, what their role in the world is. So some of this is about sort of individual strategic decisions that nonprofits are making. And that's why we're seeing a little bit of an increase in volume, is that it makes sense given our programs, especially the difficulty in seeing a response, to send a little bit more. That's sort of the path a lot of nonprofits are choosing. But we also see some really structural components to the way the messaging volume works. And depending on sector, depending on group size, there can be sort of the thing that makes sense to do because that's who you are in the world. So as I laid out at the beginning here, that increase in list growth, that increase in volume was not enough to outweigh the declines that we saw in other email metrics. So this chart, this table includes basically all the numbers that we tend to track on a message-by-message basis. So we start with open rates, which had a slight decline. The numbers in parentheses are the changes year over year. So if we look at the fundraising row, the 14% open rate was a 2% decline from the previous year. One thing about open rates you'll notice is that there are not really differences depending on the message type. So a fundraising message and an advocacy message tend to be opened at about the same rate. It's really an indication that so much of what is driving opens is less to do with the content of the message or what we're asking for, and more to do with sort of the health of your list. So how responsive is your list in general? Are you getting rid of those people who signed up in 2006 and never did anything again? As well as so much of it is about the relationship between the nonprofit and that subscriber. They are not necessarily opening the message because they want to hear about how they can give money, and they're not necessarily opening the message because they want to hear about how they can take action. They're opening that message because they care about your cause and they believe in your organization. And so maintaining that relationship is what is going to establish your open rates, as well as your list hygiene. When we look at the next row, next column across, click-through rates, this is the percentage of people who received a message and clicked on the big red donate button that you have in your call-out box. Here we do see really stark differences depending on the ask. So a fundraising message tends to have a 0.44% click-through rate. For advocacy, it's several times higher than that. It's 2.4%. That still doesn't feel like a huge number if you have spent a lot of time trying to craft some really beautiful copy. But it is what we have. This is one of the places where we actually did see a slight growth, a slight increase, which is a 4% increase in fundraising click-through rate. Page completion rate is the percentage of people who land on the page. So I click the donate button or the take action button in the email. I've landed on the appropriate page, and then how likely am I to actually complete that gift, or complete that action. For fundraising pages, it is 14%. For advocacy messaging, it is 72%. All of that adds up to your response rate. So for a fundraising message, the average response rate in 2018 was 0.06%. That was a 13% decline from the previous year. That means that to generate one gift, you have to send 1,667 emails. That's a lot. I think that math is right. Teresa's squinting at it. I think that's right. So that's, again, can feel like a huge bummer if you are a person who is writing emails. But it is what I mean when I say that email fundraising is hard, and it is getting harder. Getting that response is about delivering the right message to the right person at the right time. It's about making sure that we are making compelling offers, and it's about making sure that the list that we have is a list that is an audience that wants to respond to the kind of messaging we're putting out into the world. And so this is sort of a long-term challenge that a lot of nonprofits are facing, is finding a way to stop this sort of decline in response rates and to make sure that we're reaching those people. The last column here is unsubscribe rate. This is how many people click that unsubscribe button. It's buried in your footer. Again, there was a decline here, which is generally interpreted as good news. So 10% lower unsubscribe rate means that people are unsubscribing as a lower level, fewer people on average. It's not necessarily good news, because this could mean that people are just not opening a message, not paying attention to it, sending it straight to their promotions tab where they never actually look at anything, or just ignoring you entirely. So it's not necessarily great, but I think most groups would rather have unsubscribe rates go down than go up. So there, look, there's my good news for you. Here's a very intimidating next slide. I'll die. We're going to talk a little bit about web interactions beyond email. 1% of email visitors, of website visitors, make a donation on average. So if you get 100 people to show up at your website, one of them on average will make a gift. This varies widely again by sector, and part of this comes down to why somebody showed up at your website. So if you go to a public media nonprofit's website, there's a decent chance that what you're looking for is news. And there's a decent chance that what you're looking for is sort of the programming schedule. But other than that, you're likely there to make a gift. It can change. It'd be much lower for something like a cultural institution, where the person might be trying to get information about lots of other things that are not about fundraising, essentially. You might be going to a cultural institution's website to find the hours that they are open, if they're a museum, what new exhibitions are opening up soon, directions, where to park. There's like lots of other information that you might be looking for, and that would tend to drive down your conversions, because it's just not why people are there. On the other hand, we do have control over this. This is also about the prominence and the effectiveness of your ask. If you have a light box that says, "We need your help, give us money," that can help to increase those numbers. If you are making your donate button on your homepage really prominent, that will help this number. So there are lots of things that we can do to sort of engage this audience and try to increase the number of people who successfully complete a gift on our website. That 1% donating ends up meaning that a single visitor to your website is worth about 83 cents. That's all. I don't have a lot to say about that one. That's how much somebody's worth when they show up. You can change that by getting more of them to give, or by getting them to give higher levels. I want to drill down a little bit into mobile traffic and desktop traffic and some of these comparisons. So this is something we've been looking at for a couple of years and sort of waiting for this moment when traffic from mobile devices outpaces traffic from desktop devices. And this is the first year we've actually measured that. So mobile devices accounted for 48% of website visits in 2018 to nonprofits. So 48% of your audience is using a phone to get there. They accounted for 30% of gifts and 21% of revenue. And so that is sort of out of proportion with their overall traffic levels. Let's take a closer look. This chart is a little bit complicated. We're going to walk through it one step at a time. So what we see here in the top row is the share of desktop in gray, mobile in blue, and then tablet traffic in that sort of nice gold color. And so the majority of traffic for nonprofit websites came in not from people using a keyboard and mouse on a desktop machine, but using either a mobile device, a phone, or a tablet, or on their iPad, unless they have like the keyboard and mouse thing plugged into their iPad, but we're not considering them. So the majority of traffic is coming in not from desktop devices. However, in the next row, we see transactions. So this is the donations that are being made. Nearly 2/3 of them are coming in from desktop users. That means that over a third, 37% of transactions, of donations, are coming from users on that phone or tablet. And that balance is shifting. So the number in the parentheses in mobile for transaction, that 20% that we're looking at there, that is a 20% increase in share from the previous year. So we see that that balance is tipping, and people are giving more frequently on mobile than they have in the past. And so we're going to see those hopefully converge. If we look at revenue, it's a similar story. A desktop user is worth more on average, is more likely to generate more revenue than somebody visiting on a mobile or tablet device. But those ratios are shifting. So we see really that it is mobile users who are growing their share by 15%. They sort of took from both desktop and a mobile share on there as well. Another way of looking at these numbers and sort of explaining it is that somebody on a desktop device has a higher conversion rate and a higher average gift than somebody on a mobile device. So the desktop conversion rate, the percentage of people who click on that big donate button in your homepage banner, land on a donation page, and then actually complete their gift, that's a 21% conversion rate there. For mobile, it's a little bit less than half that, and tablets fall in between. So somebody on a mobile device who clicks on that button in your banner, in your masthead, is a lot less likely to actually complete their gift than somebody on a desktop machine. If they do complete a gift, mobile givers are giving smaller levels. Again, so an $80 average gift for somebody on a mobile device compared to $133 for somebody on a desktop device. And this is sort of a complicated picture. We are seeing that this balance is shifting and that people are more likely to be, they're giving at higher rates, they're more likely to give, that conversion rate is increasing for mobile relative to desktop and that average gift, but they haven't closed that gap yet. And part of what may be happening here is that you have somebody on their commute to work, receives an email, clicks through, looks at your website, says, I'd really like to make a gift, but I don't want to pull out my wallet here on the train. I'm going to wait till I get to the office, and I'll get on my desk computer, and I'll make my gift there because that's when I'm more comfortable giving. That may be part of what we're seeing here. That sort of people moving from device to device and giving on the desktop because they're just more comfortable doing that for whatever reason. It may also be that we're seeing some demographic differences. It may just be that the kind of person who is a mobile-first user, for whatever demographic reason, is less likely to be able to give at higher levels or less inclined to give at all than somebody who's primarily using a desktop machine. And that is something that would be largely out of our control. The last piece of this is sort of how we are treating them and what content we are sharing with them. So if your website is not making it really easy to give using a mobile device, then you are part of the problem here. And to the extent that we can streamline and optimize our mobile giving process, make that really compelling, make that really easy for the user. Some groups are doing this through adding a PayPal option or an Apple Pay option, some of these other sort of digital wallets. That may be one path toward this. There are lots of things that we can do to try to encourage people to, if you're on the mobile device, actually complete that gift. And as that continues to happen, as we sort of continue to shift our habits, I expect that we'll continue to see that that share eat into the desktop share until we see a little more parity. I'm taking a look a little bit at mobile messaging as well. Fundraising text messages had a click-through rate of 13%. So if I send you an SMS message and I say click here to give, that click-through rate is much higher than the click-through rate for email. So there are some promising numbers there as well for doing direct SMS fundraising. And peer-to-peer text messaging. So the information we have here is from Hustle, which is one of the platforms that some of our clients use and many nonprofits use to enable this kind of peer-to-peer texting. So this is not that sort of blast where the nonprofit itself sends a text message to everybody on the list. This is the thing of where it is, you get a text message saying, hi, this is Will, I'm volunteering for this nonprofit, and I really want to talk to you about the upcoming election, and make sure you get out and vote, that sort of message. The response rate for messages like this, messages that get a response back, is 15%. 2.9% of the people on these lists opt out each month, and in general, an organization sends 1.5 peer-to-peer messages each month to their list. Digital ad budgets grew by 144% in 2018. So there have been some questions about sort of where we can get new donors and where we grow these audiences. One of the answers for a lot of nonprofits is digital ads, so putting the word out there and paying for that visibility. We're going to walk through a few different metrics here. So this is what we just looked at. Digital advertising investments grew pretty dramatically by 144% from 2017 to 2018. Some of this is likely a reinvestment of sort of the spike in revenue that we saw in 2017 is, what are we going to do with all these new donors? Let's try to reinvest it into our program. Some of it may also just reflect nonprofit strategies. Small nonprofits, so these nonprofits who have revenue under 500,000 had really particularly strong growth in how much they were investing in digital ads. So this may be because they are finding good results. It may be because they just are feeling like this is a channel they have to be participating in if they want to be successful. So we do see a really strong increase in investment there. This is maybe the most frequently misinterpreted number that we report on every year, so I want to make sure that we all get it right. Overall, nonprofits invested 10 cents in ads for every dollar they raised in online revenue. This is not a measure of ROI. We'll get to that. This is not saying if you spend 10 cents, you get $1 back. It's actually sort of the flip side of that. If you were a nonprofit that raised $1 million online, then you, on average, would have spent $100,000 in digital ads. Those ads maybe brought in more than you spent on them. Maybe they brought in less. This is a measure really of the ratio between ad budget and overall budget. That's what we're looking at here, just so that you can get a sense of, if my nonprofit has this kind of online revenue, we haven't started doing ads yet, what are our peers doing? How much are they spending? This is about what they're spending, about 10 cents for every dollar they're raising otherwise. Here's that same number in a different chart form. We're going to keep on moving because we still have plenty to go. So as I said, not all of those ads are actually meant to be raising money, so not all of them do. Overall, 21% of digital ad budgets are directed toward branding, awareness, or education. 55% are direct fundraising, so click here to give. 23%, about almost a quarter, is lead generation and advocacy. This can be lots of different things. It can be click here to sign our petition. It can be click here to take our quiz. Whatever is the thing that we are doing where the purpose of that, the end goal of that ad is to actually get somebody to give us their contact information so that we can follow up with them, as opposed to actually making the gift right then and there. The ultimate goal may well be fundraising, but sort of the immediate goal of that ad is going to be getting email addresses for the most part. Now, if we look specifically at that fundraising advocacy, that 55% that were there to click here to give, 44%, nearly half of that, is for display advertising. So these are banners and that sort of thing around the internet. Search accounts for 16%. So those sponsored results you see at the top of your Ask Jeeves search. 35% is social media, so these are your newsfeed ads, your Twitter ads, your Instagrams, and then 5% is video, which includes a couple of different things. You could think of it as pre-roll ads that go before the video you wanted to watch on YouTube, or the little banners that sort of pop up at the bottom of that page of the screen. We see really different results. This is the ROI that we're looking at, or ROAS, so return on ad spend. This is sort of the immediate revenue that is tracked to these ads. We see a really big divergence depending on channel. So for display, it's a 36-cent return on ad spend. So if you spend $1 on display ads, that display ad returns 36 cents on average in immediate revenue. For search, it is $4.78. So for every dollar that we spend on search, we're seeing $4.78 in immediate revenue. Social media is down to 83 cents. So what this makes it look like, and I think one of the questions that we get most of the time is, shouldn't we just put 100% of our budgets into search? That's what has the best return. And if it were that simple, we wouldn't have to go through so many slides. Part of what is happening here, one thing to keep in mind is that search is not as scalable as some of these other channels. So there are only so many people who are searching for your nonprofit name or some of your key terms, and there's only so much you can invest in that channel, whereas display is essentially infinitely scalable. The internet is very large, and there are many sites where you can put banners. So that's part of what is happening here. This is also where attribution gets really complicated for a lot of nonprofits. So it may well be that somebody sees a display ad, is inspired to give, but doesn't want to click on that ad. They end up then Googling your organization's name, clicking on the search result that they get that's at the top, and then donating through there. If they do that, the return there is attributed to the search instead of to the display ad, even though what inspired them to give may well have been the display ad. And so we, in our work and our advice generally, is to track this number, track ROAS, but also take a longer-term view of the value and impact of your advertising that looks at behavior over time and that tries to measure impact in more complex ways, because this is sort of a service-level view. The flip side of spend is the cost per donation. So in order to generate a single donation, On display, nonprofits spend an average of $359. For search, it was $33. This sort of, depending on your average gift, will help you to find where your break-even points are. There's a question about attribution, which I guess Teresa is answering now. But yeah, this is self-reported by our participants, and so there are probably some different ways. For the most part, we're looking here probably at last click. But this is one of those places where nonprofits have different ways of sort of accounting for how we are attributing these ad revenues, which may also have an impact on these numbers as well. We're in the home stretch, everybody, here. We're almost there. We're going to talk about social media. This is taking a look at relative audience size. So if you have 1,000 email subscribers, you will have, on average, 806 Facebook fans, 286 Twitter followers, and 101 Instagram followers. Some variation here based on sector, but this is largely a reflection of sort of the actual user base for each one of these platforms beyond the nonprofit sector, as well as sort of the maturity of those platforms. Most nonprofits have been on Facebook for a while. Many of them are still sort of getting started on Instagram. Part of that is reflected in the growth as well. So relatively slow growth in Facebook audience. It's a mature platform. We've already got most of the people that we can get at a certain time. Instagram still has a much higher ceiling, and we're still sort of picking up a lot of that low-hanging fruit. That was a terribly mixed metaphor. I apologize for talking both about ceilings and fruit in the same sentence. Engagement score by type of media. So this is the engagement score is the percentage of people who took one of these engagement actions, so clicked on a link or shared a Facebook post or liked it or commented, that kind of engagement, relative to the size of the nonprofit's fans or followers on that day. Kind of a complicated one. So, but what we see is that video tends to have higher engagement than other types of posts. Links and photos don't quite reach the same engagement as video on Facebook. On average, if you post something on Facebook, 4% of your fans will see it, and the rest will not. This is a reminder that you do not actually control your Facebook audience. Facebook controls who sees what you post. And it also is a reminder that just because you posted about something once doesn't mean that your full audience has been exposed to that message. It does not hurt to talk about the same issue, the same moment more than one time. You will very likely be talking to different people with each post, or at least different overlapping subsections of your audience. 29% of the people who do see any given post are not your fans. These are people who do not follow you yet. So again, it's a nice reminder that when you put something up on Facebook, the majority of people who see it already know about you, already have some relationship with you. But a good chunk of your audience may not have ever heard of you, may not know that they want to follow you. They may be new to your issue or your cause. So keeping that in mind when you're developing your content is really important. This is maybe my favorite part of the whole study this year. This is our new, for the first time we were able to look at Facebook fundraisers. On average, nonprofits raise $1.77 through Facebook for every $100 they raise through other online channels. So this is, again, this is expressed as a ratio because Facebook revenue is not processed through your regular CRM. They write you a check, I guess. But it's not sort of kept in the same pile of money. And so we are treating them separately. So the 1% growth that we're looking at in overall online revenue does not include Facebook fundraisers revenue. It's sort of kept off to the side in most of our, the way we're processing our revenue. And so for the purpose of this study, just to keep things clean, we've kept that Facebook fundraisers revenue separate. This is all revenue from Facebook, not just fundraisers, but fundraisers is 99% of all Facebook revenue, so basically interchangeable. So this is very exciting to me. So again, the ratio of sort of Facebook fundraisers to everything else, $1.77 to 100. So Facebook fundraisers is worth almost 2% what everything else we're doing online is worth on average. For health nonprofits, it is much, much higher. It's closer to $30. So if you raise $100 through email and ads and search and your website and visitors and all the other stuff you're doing online and you're a health nonprofit, you raise on average about $30 through Facebook fundraisers alone. And taking a look at how these sort of box and whiskers charts look, that number in the white box, that's the median. That's what we've been talking about this whole time. To the left of that in the blue, that goes down to the 25th percentile. to the right of it in that gold color, that goes up to the 75th percentile. And if you look at that health spread, it's really big. The 75th percentile is raising nearly $90 through Facebook fundraisers for every $100 they're raising elsewhere. That means that Facebook fundraisers is worth almost as much as everything else they're doing online. That is a lot. It's very exciting. We're almost there. We still have like 5 more. On average, 56 users set up Facebook, or 56 Facebook fundraisers were set up for a nonprofit over the course of a year. So that $1.77 is not coming from the sort of massive outpouring of people setting up fundraisers. This is a relatively modest number, although as you can see for health groups that have maybe spent a lot more time developing a peer-to-peer program and record over time, it's much higher. A fundraiser generates about 7.5 gifts on average. Very fun. And the average gift for Facebook fundraisers was $31. So all of these numbers, to my eyes, are achievable, right? Like you get 50 people to get 7.5 people to give $30. And all of a sudden, you're looking at something that's worth almost 2% of everything else you're doing online. I think that's very exciting and bodes well for the future, assuming that we continue to see that kind of growth, which unfortunately is as much up to Facebook as it is to all of us, because a lot of this has to do with where it shows up in your news feed. The last point about Facebook fundraisers here is that almost a quarter of all Facebook fundraisers revenue came in November. And I think the culprit here is most likely to be Giving Tuesday. Lots of nonprofits asked for people to set up Facebook fundraisers in November around Giving Tuesday. Facebook as well made this a prominent part of their communications in November, including a matching gift that they put out there. And so this is something to be thinking about now. Hopefully everybody has already been thinking about their year-end campaigns for a couple of months. It's already May. We should be thinking about that as well. Facebook Giving Tuesday will be in December this year. So I'm excited to see how this all plays out with sort of our overall end-of-year December fundraising plans. This really fun infographic covers everything that I talked about. We could have just showed you this one slide and left 5 minutes into this. This is sort of all the top-line data. This and lots of other exciting things are available at mrbenchmarks.com, including a tool. We have a benchmark yourself tool where you can provide some of your own data, and it'll generate some fun charts that can give you a direct comparison with sort of the underlying benchmarks. And that is it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Seema to see us through to the end here.
All right. Thank you, Will. That was a lot of good information. So it looks like we just have a couple minutes left. So I'm going to go ahead and close out today's webinar. So if you guys don't mind, we have a post-event survey. So any feedback that you have for us really helps. So if you don't mind taking a couple minutes, filling that out. Also, we are on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so feel free to give us a follow where we post a lot of helpful tips and tricks. We also have a blog, which is TechSoup blog, blog.techsoup.org. And if you're interested, we have a few webinars coming up for the rest of May, which you can see here, and those are all listed on our website. If you're interested in TechSoup courses, we do have those available. That includes Google Analytics, Facebook advertising, tech training, and more. We also have TechSoup services, which includes help desk, managed IT, cloud implementation, in addition to Office 365 support. So that is it for today. Thank you, Will, for today's presentation, and thank you to the audience for attending and to our sponsors, ReadyTalk.